So,
Oh,
Jasmine, tell me about where you were before we started working together.
I hadn't really written in almost 20 years. I was, busy with work and career and caretaking but writing was always something that I knew that I wanted to do. And I finally reached a point where, I had the time to invest in it. And I was always a poet. But I
Mhm.
really wanted to tell some stories that I felt like required more real estate. And I was like, I'd like to explore the essay form in order to do
Mhm.
that. There was also some trauma that I wanted to write about, and I wasn't quite sure how to approach that in a way that would be accessible for others, but also in a way that wouldn't be cannibalizing my trauma and actually using it for good. It
Mhm.
allowed me to have community
Mhm.
in a way and in a safe space where I could really tell my story and see how it resonated with other folks. And then on top of just not just, how do you write vulnerably, but how do you write with a level of craft? Like, how do you think about revision? How do you title your work? How do you think about punctuation and rhythm? Like, those kinds of things were crafts lessons that you gave us. And then you brought in publishers and agents and editors and folks who could talk to us about what does it mean to put your work out in the world and how do you approach that? And so it just really opens things up for me to really go, okay, is this something for me? And it absolutely was. And then I got really excited about continuing on that
Mhm.
journey. And so I wrote one really strong essay and I got the bug.
Mhm.
And so I was like, I need to be writing more so that it could really help me produce more work. But yeah, it started with, just wanting to tell my story and not quite being sure how to approach it. And then, getting, not only community and accountability, but, the actual lessons that I needed to learn about how to approach the craft in a way that was really compelling. And you were able to unlock that for me.
Mhm.
And so I felt like that was a really special thing.
And then, how would you describe the experience of being in the finishing school? What's it like when you're in the finishing school?
I think for me, it was about structure and
Mhm.
creating habit and discipline
Mhm.
and accountability. And so there are various elements to the program that really help you think about what are all the aspects of your writing life that you need to focus on. The first of that was just generative. Like you've got like if you're a writer, you're someone who writes, and so you've got to have a discipline in terms of writing. And so having that a very important meeting is what you call it every morning where we meditate, we center ourselves, and then we write for 45 minutes really got me in a rhythm of writing on a cadence. And I still, even though I've been out of the program for a while, I still write on a regular cadence. I've built that practice of writing on a daily basis based on what I learned from going to a very important meeting. And what I learned, quite frankly, not just, the discipline of it, but having that accountability circle. Like I made a lot of friends coming out of
Mhm.
that meeting that we still hold each other accountable to doing the work. And I've taken that level of discipline and applied it to other writing groups that I have in my life. And so that was probably the building block for me
Mhm.
was the generative writing. And then you add other elements onto that as well, where you would do the craft talks. And we talked a little bit about what some of those were like, how to write different kinds of essays. So, like, I wasn't aware that there was a difference when I first started between a lyric essay and a braided narrative.
Mhm.
And that kind of thing. And so, what are all of the different ways in which we can communicate our stories? Like those craft lessons were really important for me. And so, there isn't a program out there that I have seen that actually puts all of the pieces together. Like there are
Mhm.
programs that have generative writing, there are programs that are all about craft talks, there are programs that are about submission strategies and how to get your work out in the world. But there aren't necessarily any that bring all of those pieces together. And you do that in a way that feels really supportive, in a way that's validating, and in a way that is, a really good learning environment. And so, having the weekly writers refresh, for instance, it's a meeting essentially that you have with yourself, and we have it in community where you really look at your writing life for the next week and you determine, what are your goals? You schedule, all of the times that you need to work. You look at, what are the things that you want to accomplish and make sure that you're holding yourself accountable to that. And so that's a practice I've kept for myself, even outside of the program, where every Friday I sit down and I go, okay, what are my goals for the next week? I revisit my goals for the year and make sure that the small movements that I'm making are actually in the direction of those goals. And it's a time for me to center myself in not only what I need to do going forward, but reflect on what I have accomplished to date and really just focus on what are the things from a writing career perspective do I want to not even just accomplish, but like what's the life that I want to craft for myself? That discipline has bled um, through all aspects of my life and has really helped me just become a more well-balanced person, not just in my writing life, but in every aspect of my life. The program is is one that I would recommend to anybody who really wants to take their writing life seriously,
Mhm.
and really wants to get their work out in the world. And one of the things we didn't talk about was another part of the program that you have. It's about submitting your work and pitching your work and getting your work out to literary magazines and media outlets and that kind of thing. And so it's not just the writing itself, but it's the full through line of how, like tapping into the feelings that you need to tap into in order to write a compelling essay. And then how do we actually get that published and out in the world? And so that part of the program, again, I went from not submitting a year ago and have, never submitted anything in my life to I've submitted over 200 times in the last year. And and I've gotten very comfortable with rejection because that's a part of the process. I've also got some really good wins. Like I had 15 acceptances in the last year. And so, I have poetry out in the world now. I have essays out in the world now. And that has made me feel like, not that publishing is everything, but
Mhm.
it's validating and it's made me feel like a real writer. And so that's been really important. And then the other element of the program that I really enjoyed was the firelit readings, where
Mhm.
we have us all come together and read our work aloud. And that was one where, I hadn't read my work aloud in 20 years. And I certainly hadn't, I'd read some poetry, but I certainly hadn't read prose aloud. And not even just reading the work aloud, but presenting the work, performing the work, thinking about intonation and modulation and the way in which you actually deliver the words to folks. That was really good practice for me. And it again lit a fire in me where I was like, I'm going to go out and read my work. And I did 42 readings last year.
Wow.
Like, and so, and that started with the seed that you planted where I could just read in a safe space with
Mhm.
a small group of people that I trusted, get, the feedback and the validation that I needed that the work was good and that it was impactful.
Mhm.
And then I was like, okay, I'm going to try this out with other audiences. And now I'm doing feature readings and people are asking me to come out and read, which is like mind blowing. Like before I was just like, can I get 5 minutes on your mic? And now they're like, you've got 20 minutes, like read to your heart's content.
Mhm.
Um, and so, you know, I credit your program a lot with just giving me the confidence that I needed to believe in my work and the organization and the discipline to really navigate a writing life. And I think, you know, it's one of those things where I try to pay it forward.
Mhm.
Everything that I've learned, it helped me organize so that then I could help my friends and other writer people that I know, like really think about how they navigate their writing life. I tell everybody about, about the program and all of the different elements that they need to be thinking about when they're thinking about like how they want to navigate their writer life. But I think it's life too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the lessons can be extrapolated for everything that we
Yeah.
do. I think it's important for me that like people know that like what they see and what you put out in the world and when you're, you know, telling us your story on social media and that kind of
Mhm.
thing is really who you genuinely are.
Mm.
Like you share yourself with us so that we can grow alongside you. And I find that um, really inspiring, and I feel lucky to be your friend.